how do you surrender? I guess to me, what that looks like most is just to stop resisting. Sometimes that's kind of the hard thing to watch with us is that we just keep, we just won't stop the fight. Forcing our will, like, I can figure this out. This idea that somehow I'm in charge and that I have control. And the feeling of relief of letting go and saying, I don't know how to do this. I think I'll let somebody else be in charge of this. And whether that be my higher power, or maybe it means that I need to talk to somebody. We have all of this support at our fingertips, just trusting the process and just putting one foot in front of the other, not debating, just one foot in front of the other.
I heard it through the grapevine. Welcome. It's the AA Grapevine half-hour variety hour featuring the collected voices of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm Sam, an alcoholic in Palm Springs, California.
And I'm Don, an alcoholic in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Don! It's so good to see you. It's been a minute.
Hiya, Sam.
That sure is a purple shirt you got on there.
It's a grapevine-colored shirt. I've got it that way. If I spill grape juice on it, no one will know.
So you still have a problem with your drinking. Got it.
Just because I quit drinking doesn't mean I'm not thirsty. And I do have a problem with liquids. They do tend to be. My wife gets on me about coffee on the walls.
What?
What's this coffee on the wall here going down the stairway? Don! Don't tell her.
Well, in a smooth and effortless segue, does your group support volunteer sharing at its meetings?
What?
What?
Does the group support volunteer sharing? What do you mean?
So this is something that was a new statement that I had never heard until my home group, Shipwreck, here in Palm Desert, California. We have a statement in our script that says we don't do volunteer sharing. If you have something that you need to share, get with someone after the meeting. And it's a called on meeting. So we have a person who leads for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then they call on people in the room to share. And that's how it goes. And one of the things that struck me the other night was, in some ways, I get more out of that because I figure out what I'm going to say whenever that happens, because I got to be prepared if I get called on.
That's why I don't like that type of meeting.
Well, but this is...
all I do is think about what I'm going to have to share suddenly, and I can't listen. It really bothers me. That makes me anxious.
Well, let me give you another side of that coin then, because what had occurred to me when I was talking with a friend about it afterwards, that actually makes me that much more focused on the meeting because I really give some thought about the topic.
Well, yeah, okay.
And then my friend and I often will share with each other what we would have shared if we'd been called on. So it's one of those things that it kind of makes me collect my thoughts. I'm not like, crafting my share.
Yeah, it's hard to pay attention when you're making notes in your notebook and it's going, okay, bullet points. Okay, I want to make.
Well, that's because you're writing yours down. I'm typing mine quickly. No, but seriously, it was one of those things of like, there is a flip side to that because I totally get where you're coming from on it. But then it dawned on me that I actually get more focused on the topic of the meeting because I think about, well, what does this mean to me? What would I talk about if I were to get up in front of folks? And then, of course, I listen. I don't hold on and rehearse or anything like that, but I just try to get the little bullet points of this, and then move on.
The other side of it that makes me anxious, if I was the chairperson, I'd have to know every's name, and I'm terrible with names.
Oh, no.
So now I'm anxious from the other side.
See, that's just you trying to look good. No, we have a guest lead every week, and they're the ones who chooses who shares. And sometimes they're just hey, you over there in the blue shirt. Yeah, you.
Yeah.
And then here's the fun part at my group. You then get up, walk to the front of the room, introduce yourself, and then give your share.
Well, Here's another thing. Okay, I guess this doesn't happen because you've got a chairperson who's doing this. But I went to a meeting in another city, and a treatment center was there. It was round robin. Wherever anyone shared, then they would call on the next person to share, rather than a chairperson doing it.
Yeah,
So they called on their friends.
exactly.
And I heard 5 shares in a row about how AA doesn't work and how I've been in, this is my 3rd time in AA and it doesn't work. But they're like 1 week sober and then call on another person who has just quit drinking. And they don't have any experience to share. None of these people did. And it went on for about half an hour. And I was going, are there no old timers in this meeting? Because I was visiting. Who can take control of the meeting, because I like to hear new people share where they are. But I don't want to hear about how the program doesn't work and they haven't worked it yet. I mean, they're sharing the mess rather than the message.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I prefer meetings where it's open, and if there's going to be sharing, people just jump in. But I see the point.
Yeah. And another format that I like is in meetings that are small enough, you just go around the room.
Everyone.
Everybody gets a chance to share.
I like that.
And what I like about both of these things is that I get to hear from people that I wouldn't normally hear from.
Yeah.
People who might not raise their hand to share.
Yeah, and you hear good things that way. Another thing that happens in the meetings that I go to here in Greensboro, North Carolina, there's also a reticence to call on people. So there can be long, long periods of silence. I'm a Quaker, so I also go to Quaker meetings where we have silence for half an hour. I'm okay with it, but sometimes it would be prudent for a chairperson to call on an old-timer who is just not sharing and really it's time to hear from them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When's the last time you shared? It's time for us to hear from you.
That's not a problem with me, Sam.
I believe you.
Am I allowed to jump in at this point?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
Well,
if
this
I
is
was, like,
Susie.
supposed to
Hey,
be-
Susie. Yes.
Hi. I'm kind of wondering, do you guys actually have sign-in sheets at any of your meetings, or is that not really a
No.
thing? Oh, okay. Because that's
never seen that.
that seems to be quite a thing here in St. Louis, where a lot of
Interesting.
meetings actually pass around a sign-in sheet for you to put your name down if you would like to share, or let it pass if you
in
would not like to
advance.
share. In advance, like while whatever
Never
else is
even
going on
heard
in the
of
meeting
that.
before we get to that point. A lot of times you see that in like speaker meetings, that sort of scenario, more or less.
And so all the people who were going to share during the meeting have signed in previous to the meeting
Assuming
starting.
that the notebook makes it back up to them by that point. Sometimes that doesn't happen in that timely fashion, but usually that's the goal, is that it gets back to the chair by the time that the speaker has concluded their talk, and then they can start calling people off the list. And they might start off with like just assuming all of the birthday people, anybody who has anniversaries gets to share first, or they might even call on people who are newer, something like that.
That's cool.
I went to a meeting that a treatment center visited, and they always asked one of the people from the treatment center to choose the topic about something that they have a question about in AA or about recovery. Oh, every one of those. And then the meeting would take off on that, and you'd hear all this perspective from brand new people to old timers who had lots of experience just shedding wisdom. It was a wonderful meeting and a wonderful format. This is one of the things I like about this podcast, is hearing about different types of meetings and how different they are all over the world.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. The raffle ticket meetings. Have you been to any of those?
No.
That's where they're handing out the little raffle tickets when you come in. And then if your
For a
number
big
gets
bulletin.
drawn, no, if your number gets drawn, you share.
Yes, I've been to a meeting like that at the convention. Yeah.
I love this podcast because we are flexible and we do things however we want to.
Yes, we do. We have guests every week, and this week our guest is already here with us. Hi, Susie.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Today, our guest is Susie V from St. Louis, Missouri. But
And where's this but? And we have a history snippet with Mily T, all about our Canadian friends that she's collected from Grapevine articles. So this is a big show. We got Susie, we got Mily T. But first, the news. That's a good one.
They're all good ones, Don. Grapevine's YPA World Tour features audio stories from YPA members, that's young people in AA, at events around the world. The playlist kicks off with stories by members of the 64th IKIPA, the International Conference of Young People in AA, in Austin, Texas. Stories from more YPA events will follow. Look for AA Grapevine on YouTube and go to the created playlists.
You can give a gift subscription of Grapevine or Lavinia.
Grapevine has a long waiting list of incarcerated members who want one. Get your group, district, area, or AA friends to join in.
It's easy. Go to aagrapevine.org and look for Carry the Message at the top of the site.
My name is Susie, and I am an alcoholic from St. Louis, Missouri. My home group is Friday nights. It's a women's meeting called the Keep On Trudging group.
Keep on trudging.
Yeah, and I don't know what else you need me to share as far as, I have
The
a
parole
sponsor,
officer
I
of
sponsor other women. I no longer have a parole officer, but did at one time.
All right. And how's that credit score today?
Pretty excellent, actually. It has rebounded.
Susie, thank you so much for joining us. You come highly recommended from Tammy S. Tammy, thank you so much for the glowing recommendation.
Susie, when did you get sober?
Well, September 28th, 1998, and I was 16 years old.
What was so compelling that you decided to go to AA at age 16?
Well, and I actually started out in treatment first, but I got a DWI 3 weeks after I got my license.
Ooh.
That's quick.
Yeah, it was quick, but there was a lot. There were other things that were leading up to that point, but that made me investigate some other options of how to live. Can't say that right off the bat I was willing to change my way of life. I mean, actually, after I got pulled over and all of that went down, I was like, I just need to learn how to drink and drive better. I actually got pulled over because I was speeding. So I was like, obviously, I need to stop doing that when I drink and drive. I just need to control it and manage it better, was my thinking. But when I went to my first meeting of treatment, actually, which is very closely based on AA's 12 steps, I just started to see a lot of other people who actually found a way to navigate through life without drinking and using and seemed to be relatively content in their own skin, which I knew I didn't have that. And it was the first time that people were kind of speaking my language and not telling me just not to drink. Because up to that point, that was pretty much all I had gotten from people. And I was like, I know something's wrong with me. I don't know what it is. And I felt very hopeless.
When I came in, I felt it was such a relief to hear these people describe my inner thinking and my inner feelings. And they put a word on it, alcoholism. And it was like, oh, that's what's wrong with me.
Exactly. Well, and that was the thing. I mean, everybody leading up to that point, they'd be like, well, why don't you just stop this? And I was losing friends left and right. And I found myself to be the lone wolf that they refer to in the big book, and Bill's story. And all of my friends were dropping like flies. And then it was exactly like you said, Don, that whenever I started, coming around, that I could hear people actually speaking my language and saying, like, yeah, we loved drinking and using too. We loved it. It was the first time anybody else would just say that to me. Like, we get it, and then, but also for us, and it sounds like this is the way for you too, it stopped working. Like these bad things started happening and started to pile up, and the shame and all of this different, it was just like, yes, like, okay, maybe I'm not just crazy, maybe like there's something to this. And so I also was very relieved by that. Totally.
I'm sure. Susie, getting sober at such a young age, did that have any effect on your ability to relate to other people's experiences?
Well, happily, I ended up in a treatment center first where it was all young people. And so that was super helpful for me. And then when I came into AA, I sought out other young people. I mean, and happily in the St. Louis area, there's actually some pretty solid young people's meetings, and there were even then. Not to say it wasn't difficult in the beginning. I was still in high school. So there actually was, and I just was looking down the road at all of the different events that I wasn't going to be able to drink at. Not like I needed an excuse like an event to drink, but of course in my head I was like, well, but how can I get out of this sober thing? I don't know. And just was really freaked out about like, well, prom, wedding, like all these different things that I imagined might happen down the road at some point, or just people dying, stuff like that, like things that I really wanted to be drunk for. That was particularly scary to me in the beginning, I guess, just as a young person seeing all of these things. And even though the odd twist to that is that I didn't really envision myself living past 17 or 18 anyway, when I was facing
17 or 18, you were...
Right. And when I'm looking at all this, I realize it doesn't make any sense. But of course, as I'm trying to bargain my way out of doing treatment, like outpatient or anything like that, of course, I was coming up with all of these things like, but I'm going to miss out on all of this stuff, And it's like, well, but up to this point, you haven't really been planning on living much longer. So why do you care about all this stuff suddenly? It's just interesting. So
I was in a meeting the other day. There was a guy who had just come back in. He was in his late 40s, quite a bit older than 16. This was like his fourth time in AA. He had started drinking again. He had all this experience of quitting drinking and then going back out and testing it again and going, no, it's not going to work again. It's like, this is never going to work. I'd completely give up. So I would think that at age 16, that would be quite an obstacle.
Yeah. So even with that, and there's the part in the big book and More About Alcoholism that talks about all the ways that we tried to control our drinking and tried to stop and tried to manage it and all these different things. What was interesting was I remember reading that for the first time and kind of thinking a lot of that stuff didn't apply to me. Because honestly, my goal was to get shit-faced.
Right.
Like my goal, that was my goal. I didn't want to make a fool of myself, but I wanted to drink myself to oblivion. So there weren't many times that I was like, I'm going to change my brand or environment, or it didn't look the same as what it said in the big book. But what I came to find out, and this was kind of working with a sponsor too, I did try to control it. It just looked a lot different. And also the part in the big book that I love is the part where it says you cannot control and enjoy your drinking. That is such a true statement for me that I could not control and enjoy my drinking at the same time. There were times when I controlled it where I only could get one beer. And I was super agitated about that. I was very discontented. The way it talks about in the big book, I was
unsatisfactory.
Like, jump out of my skin.
Phenomenon of a craving.
Yes.
Cuts in. And it's not fun to drink one beer.
Right. But the contrary of that was when I was truly enjoying my drinking and I was able to just go off the rails with it, that I was not controlling it, and it was, and my behavior and the consequences, none of that was manageable. None of that was controllable. And I didn't want to. But I can see times where I did try so that I could drink more. I switched schools. I convinced my parents to let me switch schools to a school that I thought I would have access to more parties, and that I could get away from some of the shame that was following me at my prior school. Or like eating. We all would come up with these tricks of how to handle more liquor longer, without getting sick, or to be alert longer during a party with friends or whatever. And so make sure that you eat before you drink, so like there's all these different things that to me, I look at and I'm like, well, I was trying to manage it, and then there are some very clear times that I can see that like I intended to not drink and drive, but shortly after I got my license, I found myself drinking and driving more than once.
We lower our standards quickly.
Right. We do, yeah.
And so what you're saying is we can surrender at any point that we choose to give up. It's the alcoholism is an elevator going down and we can get off. We don't have to ride it all the way down to the bottom floor.
Yep.
Susie, when you got going in AA, did you get a sponsor right away?
Yes. It was somebody who was really involved in service. There was no like kind of just tiptoeing around this. It was like, she was like, we're working out of the book. We're going to, go through the steps and you are going to give back because you have been a taker and you are going to give back. And so, and that was the same thing. Her sponsoring was like, that's the line of sponsorship. That's what she had experienced too. And that's what worked for her. It was amazing how much I could see my life shift once I delved into that with her. I remember getting to like steps 8 and 9, and
Step 8 made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9 made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others.
Steps 8 and 9, and reading to her what amends I thought should be direct amends and indirect amends and stuff like that. And I had almost all of them as indirect amends. And she like had her red pen out, it's
different
like,
point of
direct,
view.
Scratch that out. Direct. Yeah, it's good to have sponsorship, right? Like, it's good to have that guidance through the program. So,
Susie, you've been sober for a minute. Is there a moment that comes to mind where you felt a significant challenge?
well, I'll tell you, like, immediately when you say that, I think of 2 different times when I felt like I might actually drink. When I had some years, there was a loss of a relationship that I went through, a breakup. I was actually at an AA conference, and I ran into this person, and it just really shook me up. I was driving home, and I was like, I really could go for a drink right now. Like, just really felt like, like, I don't know how I'm going to make it through tonight. The thought occurred to me that I should pray, driving in my car down the highway, and I said a little prayer. I was like, God, like, just remove this, please, and just show me what to do next. Just show me where to be. And then the thought came to me. I was like, well, you're house sitting. Go do what you're supposed to do at your friend's house and go home and go to bed. And I felt this peace come over me. It just,
It's removed.
HP delivered, it was just
HP, higher power.
It was awesome. And it was removed. That obsession, like, it just lifted. I had another similar situation where it was a loss of a very important relationship in my life, where I, again, just felt rattled to my core and like I might drink. And again, saying that prayer and just inviting in my higher power shifted it. Once again, I just felt that peace and just felt like it's okay. It's going to be okay. And it is okay right now. Even though it doesn't feel okay, it's okay.
I've had those times as well. Sober a long time and suddenly really wanted to drink, and it's because the feeling and the situation I was in was intolerable. My son was sick, and I was terrified, and I was completely helpless to do anything. It was just too much. The thought that came to mind was, I know what will get me out of this. And I was going to meetings, and I was doing my morning prayer, and everything that I knew to do, nothing was working. That scared me to death, because if I were to start drinking, I would not help anyone. I wouldn't help him. I would suddenly destroy my wife's life. I would destroy everything. What good is that going to do? That's not going to fix anything. So I just had to dive a little bit deeper and surrender a little bit more. I called up friends in AA. They talked me through it, on my hand, and I found I can get through anything sober with the help of AA and everyone in it. That's why we call it like a toolbox, because in times where there's trouble, we have tools.
I think it's really powerful for both of you to be talking about this, because having worked the program, having a good amount of continuous sobriety instead of stopping and starting over, the farther away I am from that last start chip, provided I'm working a program, I think the greater access to the pause I have when that thought pops into my mind. I can pause, not act on it, and look, wait a minute, what are the things that I'm supposed to do? What can I do about this?
Well, and I think too, my dad was also dying of a terminal illness when I came into these doors. My plan when he died, because I knew he was going to, was that I was going to get as drunk as possible to go through that process. That was it. By the time that he passed away, I had been sober for about a year and a half, and I was able to make amends to him before he passed away. And I was able to get through and walk through that sober, with just a year and a half sober, but just with people surrounding me and with people in my life and with the tools, like you said, Don, just such a flip of what I originally had planned on that looking like in my life.
So you said at the very beginning, your sponsor said, you need to give back. How does that play out?
Well, and this is something that I still do. It's as simple as being a greeter at the door of our meeting. First of all, home group. Having a home group, so important. Part of what is so important for me in a home group is that there are opportunities for me to be of service and for me to give back. At that particular home group, we had 2 greeter positions. We had people that would go outside and clean up cigarette butts in the parking lot. We had people for setup, clean up, coffee duty, all of those different things. And so she was like, you need to be a greeter. I was sticking out my hand to every single person that walked in that door to say, hi, how are you? How's your week going? Blah, blah, blah. I'm so-and-so. It made me feel so much more a part of. And wow, it gave me some valuable time out of my head, and just made me think about other people. It made me learn people's names. It taught me how to introduce myself to other people, just basic stuff, but it really engaged me more and plugged me in more than a way that, I hadn't been up to that point. But then there's all of these other facets of service that we get to do if we find that that's something that brings our sobriety alive. A lot of stuff in the service structure, so our intergroup office stuff, being secretary for our group, general service representatives, being plugged into the larger structure of AA as a whole, district meetings, area assemblies, all of those sorts of things. And it really opens up a whole world of different positions that we can partake in. I just kind of jumped in. I think I started out as secretary at that home group. Then I got to be the GSR and then got more involved at the area and district level. We would have really fun activities with that group. We would stuff envelopes for doctors' offices or for clergy or different, giving them information about Alcoholics Anonymous so that they had it if they had anybody that came their way. And so I've really been able to serve in a lot of different capacities. And then, of course, there's the obvious things, I guess, we have to carry this message. And so I sponsor other women, that to me is that's just a given,
One alcoholic talking to another.
And of course, if I've got a little bit of time sober, then that person who walks in with one day or not even a day, me sticking my hand out and greeting them and how important that is to be able to do that. So yeah, all of that.
Wow. Just a little. There's not a lot going on there.
Tip of the iceberg. And you know what? I could go on. I'm holding back a little bit. I could talk a lot more about service.
I can tell there's a wellspring right there.
I could go on.
Well, and that's the thing. We're the half-hour variety hour. And so we just run out of time. But Susie, I'm so glad you joined us for this.
Thank you, Susie.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Now we have a special treat, an AA History Snippet. Mily T., our resident amateur AA historian, is bringing a 7-minute portrait of early AA in Canada, as described in the Grapevine Archives.
This July, tens of thousands will be gathering for our International AA Convention for the 4th time in Canada. In 1965, 10,400 gathered in Toronto, where the theme was responsibility.
In 1985, 45,600 gathered in Montreal, where the theme was 50 years with gratitude.
In 2005, 43,000 gathered in Toronto, where the theme was I am responsible.
And in the upcoming 2025 convention, our theme will be Language of the Heart.
We thought this would be a good time to revisit what the Grapevine magazine has written about how AA reached our neighbors to the north. The information here is all from articles printed from 1946 to 1990. In the July 1990 AA Grapevine article, What We Were Like, we learned that AA began in Canada in 1940, when the Reverend George Little in Toronto read a review of the Big Book and ordered a copy for an alcoholic who had resisted all other attempts at rescue. They continued to carry the message one by one until January 1943, when the first AA meeting was held at the Little Denmark Tavern in Toronto. They eventually moved to the Metropolitan United Church House, and attendance tripled. By year's end, the budding fellowship could even host a banquet at the Royal York Hotel with more than 80 persons attending. In February 1944, the first woman joined the group. The May 1946 AA Grapevine article, Rapid Growth Reported from Western Canada, reported,
On the west coast of Canada, AA is making colossal strides. In Vancouver, a group just 14 months old now numbers 150, the number having been quadrupled in the last 6 months. There's an active group nearly a year old in Victoria, the provincial capital of British Columbia. One of the Vancouver group's most interesting meetings was attended by a city police magistrate and a leading psychiatrist, the latter giving an address on the problems of the alcoholic and saying that he had come to find in AA the most promising of all available therapeutic methods for helping such people. Vancouver Police Court has an AA member in daily attendance to assist the magistrates in alcoholic cases. Growth in membership has led the Vancouver group to move to new club rooms at the Kitsilano Lawn Bowling Club and to establish regional groups in the city. You know, that's interesting that there was an AA member in attendance at Vancouver Police Court in 1946. That's not a custom that has continued, I'll bet.
No. Listeners, write in and let us know. The May 1951 AA Grapevine article titled Vancouver states, Vancouver is the majestic port through whose eyes the Dominion sees the Pacific. And here is safe port for those who are weary of grape and grain and who seek the Pacific serenity AA has brought to this shore. It was back on December 15th, 1944, that 5 grimly determined men held the first meeting of all Western Canada. Within a month, there were 8 members. Within a year, 118. And from those first meetings stems a custom perhaps unique to Vancouver AA, calling the roll.
Now this is interesting, Mily. Members who have stayed dry since their last home group meeting answer the call of their name with, here, no. Those who have slipped reply, here, yes. Pros and cons of the system still form the basis of interesting and sometimes heated discussions. But here, no stayed ahead from the beginning. Mily, it would be interesting to know if that custom still exists.
Absolutely. I hope that when we are in Vancouver this summer, we can get to the bottom of that. By 1947, when Bill W. and Lois visited Toronto, he spoke to a crowd of about 800 alcoholics. Traveling west by train, they stopped to visit groups in Toronto, Winnipeg, and Calgary. They visited Bill's father in British Columbia, and then Bill spoke at a Vancouver AA meeting with about 1,000 people present.
Canada always had a special connection with AA co-founder Bill W., though it had been the scene of his worst defeats while drinking. He was in Montreal when the stock market collapsed in 1929, leaving him penniless. Finding an attractive position with the Greenshields firm in Montreal, he lost it in less than a year because of drinking.
And in closing, the May 1951 AA Grapevine was devoted primarily to Canada. And in that issue, Bill remarked on the fact that when AA travelers return from Canada, they all remark on the warmth and generosity of the fellowship. Hope to see you in Vancouver, July 3rd through the 6th, 2025.
Thanks to everyone who subscribes to the Grapevine magazine in print or in the AA Grapevine app. Your support makes this podcast possible.
I'm at the very wit's end. Cuckoo.
I went to a party when I was 17. The next thing I knew, I was 35.
It's really not that funny.
Thanks for joining us. The AA Grapevine Half-Hour Variety Hour is posted every Monday and is produced by AA Grapevine, Inc. We don't speak for AA as a whole. We share the experience, strength, and hope of members to help others recover from alcoholism. All things Grapevine are available at aagrapevine.org. including our app and how to get in touch with us. Find us on Instagram and YouTube. If you want to know more about AA, visit aa.org or search online for Alcoholics Anonymous and your city.